So today I have Vikas Bhambri as our guest on our show. Um, Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So first question, what is your company doing? Your
What
company's,
is my
yeah,
what is my
exactly.
company doing?
Customer, what is your company doing?
Sure. Customer, or as some of our customers like to call us, Kustomer.
Customer.
It is a bit of a fun brand, when you're talking about it, internally with your colleagues. But no, Customer is a CRM for customer service platform that has now been in market for almost 4 years, and really kind of helping so many brands across the globe reinvent how they deliver their customer experience, both from a customer facing perspective and of course then the agent experience that is so critical in that experience. So we've been on that mission for the last 4 years now.
Perfect. And what is your job at Customer?
That's a great question. It changes moment to moment, day to day, but from a title perspective, I'm the SVP of Sales and Customer Experience, and what that means for us is, I have responsibility for the sales side of the house, which is account executives, the channel, sales engineering, but then I also am responsible for our professional services team that is responsible for the onboarding of our new clients, as well as our customer success team that is responsible for making sure our clients are getting full value out of their investment in the platform, and then our technical support team that is available 24/7 to answer any questions or concerns that our customers may have.
Awesome. So basically, when you look at it from an organizational point of view, everything except marketing in a sales and marketing organization. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's, so many different titles and the ways that different companies are slicing up the role these days. But, the way I look at it is from our first meaningful interaction with a client on that pre-sale activity all the way through their life cycle with customer. That's my responsibility, making sure because I look at it, look, we are still operating, as many companies are, or the industry is, in kind of antiquated models, but the customer is looking at it very differently from their perspective, which is I'm purchasing a service, evaluating a service, purchasing a service, renewing with a service. So trying to wrap our model more around that customer journey, which people are experiencing with SaaS solutions today.
I love it. And we are going to deep dive into this in a second. But first,
Great.
two personal questions so that we also get to know you in private. Where are you living right now, Vikas?
Yes. So I'm based in New York. I live actually, for those of you who may be familiar with New York, on the lovely island known as Long Island, which is an extension of New York City. So I'm in a town called Plainview out here. Been quarantined for, over a year now, or almost a year, with my wife and two daughters.
Very nice, I would say. Not the quarantine, but at least with your wife and daughter. Huh?
It's been it's been a super interesting year, as many people in my role are, I've been a road warrior for most of my career and constantly on the road, on the go. And this is frankly the first time in a 20-something year career where I've not been. And yes, it's awful that it's under these circumstances, but yes, to your point, Sammy, it's been super interesting. I joke that I've spent more time with my family in the last year than I probably did in the previous 10. So I'm not sure that's, that's a good thing, but but I think, for me, it's been a very interesting experience. And the key thing for us is we've been able to continue running and growing a successful business in light of the circumstances.
Yeah, I absolutely can relate to that. I mean, we are running a small company, but we had some parts of our onboarding service that was in person. So we flew to customers or went to customers and had workshops, and we now do everything online, and it's working even better, So sometimes we have to be forced to try new things, and there's always good and bad, of course. And I don't think everything will stay online all the time, but we for sure learned what is working online, and we may also have learned that you don't have to travel to everything work related.
That's right. I think there were probably times now looking back where I overextended myself because I thought I needed to be there. So it's going to be very interesting to see as we navigate back to, the new normal or whatever that ends up being, is how much of that I, personally will look at. Do I really need to be there? Is it something that can be handled via a Zoom? I think there'll be a lot more scrutiny by, individual leaders as to where and how they spend their time. Because, anytime you travel for a meeting, it's not just the meeting, it's the before and after, right? It's the flight, it's the packing, it's everything that goes into it. So it is a big investment. And I think, customers will also expect, I think, a different type of behavior, because even they're getting very used to having virtual sessions, et cetera. Things that we didn't even think were possible doing virtually, like shadowing a contact center agent and things like that. We're learning that we can actually do it.
Cool. That's really interesting. One other question, then we deep dive into sales and marketing topics. What do you love to do outside of work?
So, it depends on, we're a four season climate here in New York. So it very much is seasonal. In the summers, I like to be on or as closest to the water as I can. I took up sailing a few years ago. I did a lot of kayaking last summer. Now that my girls are getting older and are both, strong swimmers, so I feel comfortable.
How old are they?
Say it again.
How old are they?
They're 11 and 7.
Okay, cool.
And so I needed to feel confident that they were good enough in the water for me to go out there. And then I think, for me, in times like this, when we've been hit with a lot of snow and cold weather, cooking is a nice way for me to pass the time. So it's very dependent on the season, but I think cooking is definitely a hobby of mine that I enjoy and get to do quite a bit.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, one of the highlights of the day is me going grocery shopping and then cooking.
It's interesting, something like grocery shopping, which we frankly took for granted, now I do most of it online, but I'm actually finding pleasure in that as well, because as I get more familiar with the algorithms and the recommendations, I'm trying things that, previously I would walk by if I was in a grocery store aisle. So once again, we're all learning to adapt.
Yeah, definitely. Now coming back to your very interesting statement, how you structure the whole organization, because I don't see that often, that you have someone responsible for the whole life cycle, so to say, from a potential customer gets to know you. So basically marketing hands someone over and then it's in your turf. Did you structure it from the beginning like this, or did it evolve?
We did. Now, I would love to say there was a master plan behind it and we had the foresight, but the reality is, like most things that happen at an early stage company, it was just a matter of circumstance. We had some leadership changes, and pretty early on in my tenure here. So I came in as the VP of sales, and pretty early on, due to some transition, my CEO asked me to take on the responsibility of the customer experience team. Now, at the time, I think it was maybe 4, 5 people. So it wasn't a big lift. And my sales organization was pretty fledgling at the time as well, and was only a handful of people. So from a number of pure individuals, it wasn't a large responsibility. And as we did that, because I did have some previous experiences, earlier in my career in professional services and other things. So I took that responsibility, and then really, as we started growing as a company, my CEO and I, had a number of discussions about whether we go, like you said, to more of a traditional route that we see all the companies going. And what we eventually, kind of settled in on was having a leader. We're a customer experience platform, right? That's what we deliver to the market. How are we as a brand going to deliver that optimal customer experience? And having a single leader that is responsible for not only the front end, the customer acquisition piece, but then the retention and growth of that is super interesting, because it holds me accountable to making sure that I am making the right decisions for the customer, which eventually are the right decisions for the business, because we are a service business. I think that's something that gets lost in the term SaaS, right? Software as a service, which is it's just not about going out and acquiring customers. If they don't stay with you long term, then actually your business model doesn't work, right? And so, having that, and so for me, it's allowed me to sit down with customers. I was very recently virtually with a customer in Mexico, and I was explaining to them our model and why. And I said, I'm the same person that after you secure your contract and you become a customer or partner, is when things go wrong, because they inevitably do, right? I mean, it's just the world we live in. Technology is not perfect. When things go wrong, I'm the same person that you call. I don't send you somewhere else. And the CEO of the company really kind of said to me, he said, it's unique, but I like it because with my current vendor, I deal with somebody, they promise me all these things in the sales cycle. Then post-sale, we run into a hiccup or something, and they send me, it's this. I'm sending you to a different department, a different person. It's not my problem. And here, at the end of the day, whether I like it or not, it is my problem. It is my solution. And so I think I've been talking to more and more of my peers and CEOs and investors that I believe if you're running a SaaS business, this is the model that you should go to. We ended up here by accident, but I think we're a great proof point that it absolutely works, and it's in the best interest of the customer, which, as I said, is eventually in the best interest of your business.
So are you the only one who is cross-functional about all of these steps of the life cycle, or do you have more people who also take a customer by the hand and basically be there for the whole journey?
So no, I mean, so I am, at the end of the day, okay, it all rolls up under me, but I think for me, we've done some very interesting things across the organization to continue this behavior. So, even on the sales side, we have incented our account executives to stay engaged with customers well through their life cycle here. So once again, a lot of companies run from the mindset of, hey, you sell what they call a logo, you sell a logo and then you move on. We have purposefully created our compensation plan, our structure, our roles to have our account executives involved with their accounts well past that period and well into the life cycle of the customer. So that's one example. Mm-hmm. The other is our customer success team.
Can we shortly stay there, because sure. I'm super interested in how you what KPIs do you then use and how do you structure a compensation plan?
Sure. So a couple of things. I think one is just having the very concept of account ownership. The account executive, owns the account for as long as they're here, right? So that's something that's unique. There's not this, you only own it for 3 months or whatever it is, period, or whatever. The other is from a compensation perspective is they get credit for the continuous growth that customer sees with our platform. So continued usage, expansion, adding more contact center agents into the platform, the ability to upsell more features or services, all of that continues to reside with that account executive.
Mm-hmm. Understood. So basically, they are sales and customer success somehow to some level. Do you also have I stopped you before, but what's coming after that, so to say, in the life cycle?
Sure. So, if you think about it, so customer, client, because not to get the word customer, this is where it gets confusing, right? So the client purchases the software, mm-hmm. and then they go through the onboarding process of actually implementing the software. So my professional services team will work with them through that period of getting them live, running and trained, getting the agents trained, etc. But at some period, that project will wrap up. One other thing that we've done is, yes, the account executive is still a point of contact through that relationship, but we actually bring in our customer success team pretty early on in that. So it's important for me, we do have a customer success team, is for them to understand the, project, what's going on, the objectives that the client is trying to hit with, making this transition to the customer platform. So they're also, so really there's quite a few different touch points that the client has. They have their account executive that maintains the relationship. They have a customer success manager. They may even have a technical account manager. So really making sure that we put forward, I look at it as a white glove service, all the resources they need to get the maximum value out of our platform, so that they continue to grow and maintain their relationship with us.
Mm-hmm. So if I would be an account executive at your company, what would be my 3 top KPIs, and how would they relate to my compensation?
Sure. So the 3 things that we look at are, number 1, just sales bookings, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
Pretty standard. Now, we look at that in 2 buckets. One is new customers or new bookings. Actually, 3 buckets. New customers, new bookings. We look at it in terms of expansion. So how much do your existing customers expand with you? And then the third is any upsell. So are you going back to your existing customers and selling them new products or services? So those are the 3 things. So that's number 1, just sales bookings. The second thing that we look at is pipeline generated. This is extremely critical for us because we need account executives who can come in here and, really generate their own business. I look at it from the standpoint of, marketing and business development and the channel. They're all investments we've made, resources we have. But our best performers continue to be the people that can go out there and self-generate their own business, which frankly is a bit of a lost art, in the entire software sales arena these days. So those are kind of the 2 primary buckets that we measure on a regular basis.
And what is a customer success manager then measured against?
So they're measured against the renewal rate of the actual logos or the customers, and the revenue associated with those customers, right? So those are the 2 things that we measure our customer success managers on.
So it's not upsell, it's renewal, or is it included?
You could put the upsell piece into the bucket of, that revenue component, right? Because at the end of the day, that's going to grow the revenue and but our primary thing is really having them focused on making sure the customer is happy, healthy, successful, and thus, make sure the renewal is a non-event, right? They work in close partnership with the account executives on the upsell piece, right? So they may identify an opportunity. The customer may proactively reach out to them and say, hey, we read the new newsletter, or we saw the alert in our product, in the platform about this new feature we'd like to take advantage of. And so they will then kind of be the conduit of, getting the account executive, fully engaged on that particular transaction or discussion.
Yeah, that's why I asked. I was curious on how they work together, and it's really interesting in how you separate the 2 and how they still work together and have some common KPIs, so to say. Very, very interesting, I must say. Cool. So in our pre-interview, we talked a little bit about account-based marketing, which is basically also taking in several functions, working together to acquire one new customer. What is your take on account-based marketing, and how do you, like, maybe it's easier for you to then also explain it from your company's perspective? Sure.
So look, as you said, account-based marketing is all about how do you leverage, and this is my view, because I think the challenge with account-based marketing is you could almost go to individual and get a completely different definition, right? I look at it as holistically. How do we as a company look at a specific account and leverage all our resources, and we have a lot of them, We have the marketing demand gen team, we have the business development team, we have the channel team, we have the sales team, we have the executive team. How do we leverage all of these to make sure that this particular prospect is aware of our brand, our offerings, and how we can actually help them, service their customers better, right? Where I think this particular, initiative falls down, and I think it's something that we continue to focus on and try to address, is I think, once again, like I said, the way we've kind of morphed our customer experience story, I think we need to do that on the front end, on the customer acquisition side, because I think we and many of our peers run an antiquated model, which is we look at pipeline attribution by these different silos. And then we wonder why they don't work together, right? Because if you're only going to give credit to the marketing team or the biz dev team or the AEs or the channel, then there's no incentive for them all to work together to acquire this particular account. And I think that's one thing that I've really been championing here at Kustomer. And I think it's something that, I think there's some people in the industry doing very well, but that is, something where look, at the end of the day, we as a company want to partner with, XYZ brand. Let's just use Disney as an example. I think you go and get the pie, and then you figure out how to divide it amongst your different teams, right? As opposed to worry about, this kind of antiquated model of saying, hey, this is a marketing lead, this is a biz dev lead, and therefore you're not getting the economies of scale and getting them all to work together.
Yeah. Like I understand the concept, it absolutely makes sense. And also from a customer point of view, I mean, the customer doesn't care if the one piece of content is from the marketing department and then someone else calls you and they just want to have like a good experience, get some value out of the first interactions, and then maybe at some point decide themselves that they want to interact with you, or they are reached out by sales development rep. But in the end, I understand that all these pieces have an impact, and it's sometimes super hard to attribute it, especially the whole brand awareness part, I assume. So the concept is clear. How to execute it, that is like, I think, a tough part. And there are probably some things where you say we are really good at, and some things where you say that's something we are still figuring out. And you can talk about either of those, whatever you feel comfortable. But I think it's a super hard nut to crack. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think we are trying to tackle it in bite-sized chunks, right? I mean, like I said, getting the 4 or 5 prongs that I mentioned, all kind of moving in the same direction is a challenge and something that we're, proactively aware of and addressing. So what we're trying to do is, where can we get some of these different, groups to work together? So, getting, where we've seen a lot of success is getting, marketing and sales, and business development to partner around events. So using events as the atomic unit that everybody can focus around and drive interest or awareness in, right? Getting marketing and sales to work on very specific campaigns, like a holiday campaign or, a themed campaign. So maybe doing it on a campaign umbrella. So I do think, those are some of the ways that we're tackling it. But where I see nirvana is getting everybody lockstep. And I don't think you can do this, by the way, for thousands and thousands of accounts, right? I think, where do you take, 50, 75, depending on the size of your company and level of resources? How do you take this, who are the brands or customers that you want to partner with that will have a significant impact in your overall growth? I look at the old kind of, recipe of, getting an account and maybe if I can get this account in this vertical, it's actually going to open up a vertical for me. It's going to get me 10 more, 100 more, 1,000 more. Or if I can get this one account in a particular geography, they're the company that everybody looks to for innovation, right? And if I can get them, I can then, grow from there. So how do we get all these resources? Because the thing is, as kind of complex as we are on our end, especially when you're talking to a mid-market enterprise customer, they are that much more complex on their end. There's multiple departments, there's, different levels of hierarchy, there's different roles, there's, a geographic, segment to it. So if we don't bring all our, if all I said was, look, my strategy here is I want to go work with Disney, I'll just pick on Disney again, and I'm going to take one business development rep and say, figure it out. I mean, there's not enough time in the day. There's not enough creativity, time, etc., to figure out how to get into Disney by myself, right? So really, how do you leverage the breadth of your, especially in an early stage company, you're only as big as you make yourself look. And how do you leverage all these resources, your channel partners, your marketing departments, demand gen engine, etc., to go and then help the BDR or the AE with, making sure that Disney is aware that you exist and what offerings you have?
I like the concept because it's even applicable for super small companies somehow. Because you could start ABM, like account-based marketing, by starting with a project. You say, okay, this is one goal. Maybe you take a project, could be an event, or a project could be, let's take a Disney. Bring the right people together in one place and let them create a project plan where they work together. Everybody has his things to do, but in the end, they come together and talk to each other. Because in the end, I have the feeling that when you break up the silos between people and they start to get to know each other and they start to talk about their issues and problems and understand each other better, then somehow magic happens. And so I like the notion, what you said about you don't have to make it complicated, and even you are not thinking about the whole big thing and figuring it out at once. You do it in little steps that get you step by step closer, so to say.
That's it. And I've seen it work. So, it can be done. I think, previously I was at a company called LivePerson, and we made it work. And, I think the credit goes to, as a leadership team, we had a singular focus that there are certain brands or, companies we wanted to work with. And, how did we get everybody focused on those? And I think our CEO at the time was instrumental in that, saying, hey, look, there's certain brands in the world we want to work with, and we have to all use our creativity, including himself, right? So I think that's also a key thing is, where you have that top-down focus to say, look, we need a concentrated strategy of how to, and once you get it right and you do one, then it becomes very easy to continue to replicate. It's that first one that is the hardest one to crack.
Yeah, that's really good. You create a playbook. I mean, you refine it step by step and you get better over time. But in the end, it's like creating a product for a startup. You start with an hypothesis, you build a minimum viable product, you go out there, you see what sticks, you learn how it works, and then you get better over time. So I like it. Really good.
And look, the world is so fast moving, right? So let's just say if you've got 10 people working on one account and they're all keeping track of the leadership changes, the announcements, the product announcements from that company, the strategic announcements from that company, the tweets, whatever it is, all of this, there's almost too much data out there about these companies. So if you have 10 eyes and ears that are listening for what's happening at that company, and then on the flip side, you now have 10 people that are bringing creative ways to introduce your brand or service to that company. Because once again, look, I'm a very opinionated person, but I don't have all the answers. So if I just sit there all day and say, look, I know that this person at XYZ company is going to want to hear this, I may be completely off base. And I think that's another thing when, the beauty of account-based marketing to me is if you have that strategy, it also brings the creativity of the broader team, and then you can take something that works in an account-based marketing and you can actually then expand it across maybe a targeted account list. So for example, if I use a financial services account and I come up with a message that works to penetrate this account-based financial services account that we want to go after, then I'm like, wow, let me take that message and now scale it out to 1,000, right? And maybe, it will, end up being successful. So I think that's another thing where ABM can be a great experimentation tool or an incubator for innovation in a sales and marketing org.
I see some analogy in creating like long form content, or you can do it however you want. You can record a podcast, you can create something that is longer, make little pieces out of it. So try this out in the messaging on LinkedIn or whatever channel you want to use. See where the audience is resonating most. And that's what we, for example, do. And then picking the stuff where you have most interaction and where something is sticking and putting it into the sales messages we use. So that's really working well, I must say. And I like it that you can even do it for, and I never thought about it, for account-based marketing. I mean, this is an incubator, as you said, for that and what's coming out of it is not just hopefully this one client and maybe the perfect framework that you can build on for other ABM approaches, but also it trickles down in different areas, maybe for marketing, maybe for sales. That's really nice.
Yeah, look, I think it's very hard to scale experimentation, right, in the sales and marketing org. It is really hard to do because, everybody's looking at, dollars spent and ROI and all those things. But I think this is an opportunity where you can experiment. And then, like I said, if something works, figure out a way to scale it out to the broader org and kind of make it part of your core. So I think it's super exciting. Like I said, I've seen it be successful. And actually, it's a great way to galvanize, these different departments and functions that, can often see that they're working in their own little worlds, right? It really brings, like, broadly speaking, the sales and marketing team together, but, more, if you start looking at it under the covers, brings your demand gen team together with your BDR team, with your channel team, et cetera. So it's also a lot of fun because I think that's, we talk about team selling, but I think team prospecting is another fun activity.
Yeah, absolutely. And those little things make a difference. It's a totally different example that just popped up in my mind, but I think I just have to say it. When I started working, my very first job was as a consultant, management consultant. And I thought, hell, we are flying around during the week and I never see my colleagues. I don't get to know anyone. So I went to the management and asked, hey, can you give me like $80 once a month for each person that wants to join me in going out and eat something together and party a little bit? And he said, well, why? And I said, well, I don't get to know my peers. And I mean, I think it adds value to know people because then you know who to ask, when you have questions. And he said, yeah, let's go for it. And that was 14 years ago, and the initiative is still standing.
Great.
So it seems to add value, and I saw it work. Yeah, it's just tough in a remote setting, and that's something we have, for example, to figure out when you're a remote working company, how to build those little interactions. But that's a totally different topic.
Yes.
Let's go back to like we talked a little bit about content, and what you mentioned also in the pre-interview is that. That it really helps that if you create content to arm your champions. What did you exactly mean with this?
So, if you look at most buying decisions today, and the number of people involved in the purchasing decision from a company are, I think 5.7 is kind of the average, if I, the challenger customer, which was, Matt Dixon's last book. And so it's getting more complex. There's more people involved, particularly in the mid-market enterprise, but frankly, you could scale it down. Maybe in a SMB, it's not 5.7, it's, 3.2, but there's still a lot of people involved because these are critical decisions, unless you're selling, a $5 widget, right? And so these are critical business impacting decisions, especially in the enterprise application space. So from that perspective, we often look at, okay, we've, worked with this individual, we've positioned our product, our service. What I think people fail to realize is this individual now needs to go and sell it internally. And you as an account executive may not always get that direct audience with the other person. So for an example, if your primary buyer is maybe the business user, maybe a head of sales or head of operations or head of marketing, you may get the day-to-day, your interaction and the evaluation may be with them. What you might not get direct access to is the other participants, the financial person, right? So the CFO, the financial person that's involved in it. You might not get access to the IT, the technical people that are involved in the purchasing decision. Maybe there's security that's involved, right? So, and obviously this could be multiple people depending on the size and scale of the organization. There's procurement, there's all these things. So this person is going to get asked, your kind of key contact or conduit is going to get asked by these different groups very specific questions around your product or service. So how do you enable this person to then go and be really an extension of your sales team to go and do that? So how do you position them when they're talking to the CFO and the CFO says, what does my cost look like over 3 years? And what is the depreciation of this? And, how does the one-time fee work and all of these things? If it's not clear to this individual and you're not speaking to that CFO directly, you're gonna lose that part of the sales. You're gonna lose that part of the decision. So that is absolutely critical. And I think it's something that, more and more of us are aware of from an enablement perspective is we can't just enable our team to have that first line conversation, right? With that marketing buyer or customer service buyer or sales. It's then all those other people that either our seller needs to be comfortable, talking to, but in reality, they actually need to be almost like a train the trainer. Is how do we enable them to train that business decision maker or whatever it is to then go have these multiple conversations internally and almost proactively. And I think this is why, a few years ago, and maybe I don't think this was the same book, but there was this statistic that came out which was like 57%, I think, or 60% of customers had done their research before ever talking to a salesperson. So I remember when it came out, people were saying software sales are dead, go find another profession, etc. Yet I see the number of people coming into this profession growing exponentially, right? And the reason is because, yes, people are going and doing that evaluation. So, I, as a head of sales or CX, might go and look at a tool and do my research, and I might reach out to that company. But why do I really need that salesperson? It's because I actually now need to go sell this to my CEO, my CFO, my CTO, and I need that salesperson to really help me with those conversations, right? And a website generally doesn't do enough, right? So I think that is the critical role of the account executive going forward as these decisions become more scrutinized, more complex, and more impactful to any business organization.
Absolutely get it. So how do you do it in practice at your company? I mean, like, if I would assume how you, like, theoretically, and I never did it like this, because for us it's quite straightforward. We directly go to one decision maker and he says yes or no. So we are still in the smaller company area, but still, how I would theoretically do it, and then I'm really curious what you're saying is, I would map out the organization with the key 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decision makers, what they need as information, how to present it usually, maybe even the personality profile, if you even go so far, so you know how to frame it, so to say. And then comes the tricky part. Once you have this, your own salesperson could perfectly sell to those people, but then you have to make it so simple and easy that that an executive who has a lot of other things to do, and he maybe is your champion, but it's not his top priority to hard sell your product, to make it super simple and easy so that that person takes that information, understands it, and can deliver it impactful.
That's exactly right. And this is a very close partnership between any company's product marketing organization, its enablement organization, and then of course, you know, the account executives, right? And so I think the way you mapped it out is perfect. It's just saying, look, who are the different constituents that are going to be part of our evaluation? And as I said, there will be a component of that depending on your selling motion. You know, are you dealing with just one profile of company? So if you're just dealing with, you know, the Fortune 100, then okay, let's put them all in that bucket. But reality for most SaaS businesses today is you're spanning a spectrum. Some people are going SMB all the way to enterprise. Some people are, you know, mid-market enterprise. So whatever the spectrum is. So you almost need to create that profile for, you know, that bucket. And, you know, then you need to look at, as you said, what is important to those people? How are they best served? So for example, you know, one thing I've learned about the IT buyer, particularly in, I think, the last 3 to 5 years, is they don't like meetings. They want documentation. They want clear documentation, and they want, funnily enough, to be publicly available. Like giving them a document that's a PDF, there's a lack of trust there, because in their mind, it's a marketing document, even though it may be, you know, APIs, web services, and actual, the fact that you're handing me a PDF, you've already lost me. So they want a website with dev docs, right? And I understand the rationale too, is because if it's a website, that means you're actually updating it. It's a living, breathing thing, not a PDF you publish once a year. And that's how they operate internally. So that's how they want to operate with their vendors. So that's just one example, right?
And
you've got
just one thing I wanted to add, sorry to interrupt you.
Please, no.
But I mean, we are working with personality profiles in our company and adapting the message because we help other companies get in touch with potential clients. And what you're describing is, I mean, there are many profiles, but in the DISC profile, it's a blue personality type. It's like the accountant who wants to do everything perfect, who needs a lot of data, who wants time to digest the data, and then they take a rational decision. You shouldn't push them, and it's like lining up perfectly. So in the end, you're doing it maybe subconsciously, or because you know your target people really, really well. But that's what I meant with, I think there's like even a personality type hiding between or behind each of these personas.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you know, depending on your product or service, who you're, you know, the profile that you're selling to is so important. You know, and I've sold solutions in, you know, other stops that were targeted at a sales leader or a marketing leader. You know, they have a certain type of, not to put everybody in a big bucket, but there's a profile of people that go into those roles and how they think and how they operate versus a customer service buyer, right? And how they think and operate. So you have to adapt to it. And actually, this is a very important thing that, especially when you're hiring account executives that have sold to a different type of buyer, it is part of your enablement has to be, how do you speak and adapt to the buyer profile that you're now selling into? So for example, you know, maybe I came from a company that was selling to marketing buyers, and marketing buyers, you know, are, you know, interested in this and that and the other thing. Now I'm dealing with a customer service buyer, right? Your profile has to change. Your approach has to change because their expectations are very different, and their willingness to take risks and do certain things, not to broadly categorize, but generally is going to be very different than the marketing buyer. So I think that's one thing, you know, once again, from a enablement organization, from a thought process, it's very important that you know, educate your sellers as to how to approach, you know, different folks in the market.
And now I understand it, the concept, and it seems like you really have everything figured out in this way. The only thing that I didn't get yet is, how do you make it so simple that your champion within the company can take it for these different, like, because this is still complex. You have like this guy, and maybe they don't even know all the things, you know. They don't know that be aware of the IT guy, they need it in this way, and be aware of the CEO. You have to serve it short and crisp, and the CFO wants some numbers, but not too long, whatever, you know. How do you do that in practice?
So in practice, the way we do that is, you know, we come in from the beginning as to, you know, when we're introduced, and whether we have a, you know, qualification call, discovery call, whatever you call it, is we present a proposed plan of how this process should run.
Cool.
And I know it's a very delicate conversation, right? Because at the end of the day, you're the salesperson, and you know, the customer should drive it. But as I said before, if the customer is driving it, why wouldn't they just go to your website? Why do they need to speak to you? And that's something that's really hard to get a lot of account executives to understand. What's the value they're bringing? And so one of the things that we do is we look at like what we call like a mutual action plan. Based on our experience, and we've done this now for 4 years with hundreds and thousands of companies, right, who've been through this process. So we're bringing you our blueprint of how we believe an evaluation for a company like yours should go. Now, you, Mr. Customer, might say, I'm looking at the blueprint, and you know, you've got in here that we're going to do a workshop, and we're going to do a custom demo, and we're going to do a financial business case review, and and you might say, I don't need to do this and this. And okay, look, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to make a little note here that you say you don't need this. In my mind, I know that you're still going to have to do it, because I've done this hundreds and thousands of times before, but you may not know that, but I know. So we'll continue to work through the process. We're not going to start an argument right off the gate, but in the back of my mind, I'm going to continue to refer back to that blueprint and say, are you sure that you don't have to do a business case? No, we have the budgets, you know, we're good. You know, I have the signing authority. Okay. But being aware of it and continuing to, and then at some point, maybe now that person's boss comes in the next meeting, and you go through your blueprint again, and you say, hey, you know, we've modified it based on the information that Sammy gave us. And the boss might say, oh, Sammy, for a project as big as this, we will have to do a business case review. Oh, great. Let's put it back in, right? It's a working document. Mm-hmm. So that blueprint becomes very important. And yes, you can always, you know, every engagement is different. You can steer away from it. But where I see, you know, it fall down is people say, look, I don't feel comfortable presenting that because the customer, you know, drives it, etc. And then the second thing is they don't hold each other accountable to, are we doing this? Because most account executives are afraid to hear that the customer doesn't want to do the next step, because that means their deal is dead. Now it's a bit easier in my role, but I think it's the discipline I need to, you know, enforce around my team, which is, look, if they're not going to give you information, if they're not going to agree to a planned process, at some point, that means there's no project here anyway, and there's no opportunity to partner. So at some point, I know it's hard, but you need to walk away and go focus on something else, right? And that is a very difficult discipline to create in a sales organization, that ability and comfort level of walking away.
Yeah, and it also frees up your time to focus on the more relevant potential prospects, you know. Is this document, is this blueprint, is this like a Word document, a PowerPoint? How can I imagine it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you may present the concept using a PowerPoint, but what we've seen work best is we use Google, right? A Word doc that basically has like the timeline, right? Here are all the things, here's the owner, here's the date, and we share it with the customer and we work through it as we progress. So just like you have a project plan for post signature and the rollout, it's almost like a project plan for that evaluation process.
I love it. That's something I will copy for my organization. It's really good.
Hey, great to hear.
So we are almost done with our time now. And we are coming to the 5 rapid fire questions
All right.
at the end. But don't feel stressed. You can answer slowly.
Okay.
What do you do to keep body and mind fit and sharp?
Sure. And that's critical all of the time, but particularly over this past year. For me, I'm a big fan of the Headspace meditation app. That's a great way for me to start the day. And, you know, as challenging as it can be with the seasonality I talked about, but, you know, some level of exercise, I think is critical, you know, at any point in the day. But that's something, you know, you probably see my treadmill kind of over here in the background there. You know, that's been you know, something that I've really, you know, had to probably more discipline in this time to do. And so I think both of those things just to, you know, so the Headspace app and just doing a little bit of something, because otherwise I can literally sit in this chair for 8 hours a day. And that's not going to be good for anybody.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I know that if I don't do my sport in the morning, I'm like I miss energy, and when I don't do it in the morning because I think I'm too busy and I want to do it in the evening, I don't have energy. Like everybody's different, but I just know now if I don't do it in the morning, the day is not as good.
And the one thing that you know, I've really pushed myself to create more discipline around, which is hard, particularly for, I think, people that are in the software industry,
Mhm.
is this discipline around screen time. And what I, you know, kind of coming into the new year, one of the things I really looked at was not looking at, you know, whether it be my phone or my laptop or my iPad, couple of hours before bed. And then believe it or not, as impactful is, you know, limiting the amount that I look at when I wake up as well. Just giving my mind time to adjust, right? You know, and I think that is so I think, you know, I'll let my team speak for me, but I feel like that's made a huge difference because I think it gives me a kind of that time to kind of settle down
Mhm.
before I then go into my day. And it's personally had a tremendous amount of impact.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Um, and I mean, those apps are so addictive that if your cell phone is right next to you, you just look at it. You know, at least I do it. You know, if I have it right next to my bed, no way that
We,
I'm not going to look at it in the morning.
you know, the amazing thing is that most people, when we have this discussion, they always go to the social media apps, right? And they talk about those. But I think for most of us in the business world, it's not the social media apps that, you know, look, Slack, Gmail, they all have, or any email service, they all have the same behaviors built into them as a social media app, right? And that usage, that fear of not knowing, whether it's fear of not knowing what's happening across the world or with your sports team on social media, it's the same thing of not knowing what's with your business. And, you know, I think, you know, that's one thing where I encourage, you know, my team, you know, when you go on vacation, when you're off hours, I said, look, I may even message you. Maybe something comes up in my mind and I may message you on Slack, but I don't expect you to look at it on a Sunday afternoon, right? Look at it on Monday, you know, Monday morning. Now, I've also had to discipline myself to say, look, I know people are going to look, so I'll try to send a scheduled email or something instead. But I think once again, we have to hold all ourselves accountable because if we are not in the right frame of mind, I don't think we can be as good at what we do as, you know, we have the potential to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Your favorite business book?
So many. I'm a big reader, but the one that I keep going back to is Simon Sinek's Start with the Why. Because I think whether you're taking on a new role, you know, in any function, I think it's very important to use it as your frame of reference to, especially if you're in a sales or marketing role, to think about why do you exist? Why are you out there? But I even think even if you don't change roles, your company is changing. So, you know, every day you're actually changing your role, even though you may be staying still because your company continues to evolve. So almost using it to recalibrate, you your purpose and your company's purpose and why you're doing what you do. And so that's a good one that I would strongly recommend to anybody.
Mm-hmm. I didn't read it, but our CTO, he introduced the concept, and we did the exercise a year ago. We did it now, and things changed, even though we are like a super small young company, but it makes sense. Absolutely. Favorite business leader you follow?
Oh, there are quite a few, but I think one that I've actually had the benefit of working with, because he's on our board, but I was a fan of his even prior to that, is Thomas Tungs from Redpoint. I think he does some great, and if you follow him on social media or on LinkedIn, etc., just a great review of SaaS businesses, and obviously, this is the world I live in, the world I love. And so just understanding how other companies are operating, what, really looking at the metrics of our business. I, believe it or not, people kind of laugh at me because, I'm a math major. I started my career as a developer, etc. But I use the data, but I don't live and die by the data like a lot of people do, particularly I think in our world. I still go a lot with gut. But I think it brings me the discipline of looking at certain things, repeatedly through our business. So that is a business leader I would suggest if you're in the SaaS world in particular. He's a great follow.
Mm-hmm. Who should be our next podcast guest and why?
This is an interesting one. I think somebody that would be interesting, I think, for your audience to hear from, my former boss and a mentor who's, the president of field operations at Confluent, Erica Schultz. Just a great background and, experience of growing and scaling organizations. So if Erica is available, she would certainly be someone that I think your audience would benefit from.
Okay, I try to get you. And last one, you can directly address our audience. Anything they and we can help you with.
Yes. So I'm looking right at him. So to the audience, one, thank you for your time today, and thank you for listening. But I think if you know of anybody that, we're a growing organization. We have roles across the board. I can selfishly say in my sales and customer experience organization, but really broadly, customer is growing at a rapid clip. And, we are a software company, but software companies are built by amazing, talented people. And we have a great group already, and I'd love to continue to add to them. So if you know of anybody in your network that is looking for a new challenge, our careers page is always kept up to date, and they can reach out on the careers page, or if they want to reach out to me directly and on LinkedIn, please do. But that would be my ask of the audience is, help us find more talented people to serve the purpose of the customer mission.
I put it in the show notes, the link, and I also put the link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Thank you so much, Vikas. It was a pleasure, a lot of fun, and I learned a lot again. So yeah, thank you for your time and your insights.
Thank you for having me, Sammy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, bye.